Welcome to the first ever episode of Bloody Elbow Cross Promotion. I am your host, Zane Simon, joined today by Eric Fontanez. Is it formerly now, or is it currently still with MMA Weekly? Because that's where I always associated you, but I know now you've got this Champions thing going, and I want to make sure it's a Champions Fight. You're the senior editor over there now, and
Yes.
that is your first and foremost thing. Is MMA Weekly still a side gig, or is that like that X that just floats out in the past and you don't talk about it anymore?
No, I'm still very much with MMA Weekly. I do a lot of associate editing for them. Still run their hot sauce blog. Help them out in a lot of different ways. But mainly, yeah, I'm with champions.co. We just launched a few months ago, and I've assumed the role of senior editor and essentially overseeing the entire operation of the site. So that's basically where you'll see a majority of my stuff now.
Cool, very cool. This is a little weird for me because I'm trying to start up this show where I'm getting to talk to people about some big topics, things going on in the MMA world, things that I'm interested in, and I realize how little I know about people beyond Twitter or something like that. So I'm just like, oh yeah,
hey,
sure,
Twitter's a great way to learn about somebody. I mean, but obviously it's not everything. So I'm glad we're getting this opportunity, Zane.
Yes, it's true, because I know you hit me up like a month ago and you're like, hey, we should do a show sometime, or you should have me on your show. I was like, okay, fine, let's do it. I got the idea. I'm gonna start up this thing. And it's just like, I don't, where do you even live? Where do you, what city do you live in? I know nothing about it.
I am from parts unknown, a la the Ultimate Warrior. No, I live in beautiful Southern California, Orange County more specifically. Lived here all my life. Well, Southern California all my life, but I grew up in Los Angeles in the San Fernando Valley. Lived here for probably about the last 4 years. So just getting my footing in here and enjoying the sunshine, the weather. Everything's lovely out here. Where are you staying?
I'm up in Seattle, so I'm, still West Coast, best coast, just further north. That's right.
All hail the North.
That's right. But first, I just kind of want to jump into this. I want to talk Brock Lesnar because we're warming up for UFC 200, and John Jones versus Daniel Cormier may be the main event. We've got Joanna versus Claudia coming up, and Eddie Alvarez fighting for the lightweight title against RDA. But really, Brock Lesnar is that's the thing now for the next week and a half that I'm just counting the days for. Is Brock Lesnar versus Mark Hunt. And I didn't mean for that to be what it was. I didn't think when they announced it, I wasn't like, oh my God, Brock Lesnar. But it's still the thing that's just constantly running through my mind. What the fuck is this dude doing? So
he's getting paid. That's what he's doing.
Yes. Tell me, what do you think of Brock Lesnar coming back to MMA? Is that are you surprised as I was? Because I was totally shocked.
Yeah, I was shocked. I mean, it was probably about a year ago that he announced that he is closing the door on MMA and he's signing with the WWE and he just can't do it anymore. And so I was sold on the fact that we'd never see him in the octagon again. And then out of nowhere, Ariel Helwani just, reports Brock Lesnar is going to be on UFC 200, and everybody kind of looks at that and says, he's usually really right about everything, but this seems like a troll job. And then more and more started to come out, and there you have it. During the UFC 199 broadcast, they do Brock Lesnar coming back to UFC 200, and it's like, what is going on? This is just so upside down. Then the next thing you know, Michael Bisping's a middleweight champion. It's just like, I don't even know this world anymore.
Yeah. Let's not talk about Bisping being middleweight champ. I'm still not sure about that. I'm not willing to commit myself to that idea.
Yeah, is it reality? We don't know. Could be. But
I think somebody asked me maybe when a rumor started kicking around, because I think it was even somebody mentioned it as a rumor before Ariel Helwani even reported it. It kind of bubbled up. Somebody mentioned do you think, I'm hearing Brock Lesnar is coming back for UFC 200. I was like, nah, that's some dumb bullshit. Nobody, Like, that's not true. And then it just kind of fell, and that's just like you realize, because this is the weird angle of it for me, is that Paige Van Zandt turned down UFC 200 to stay on Dancing with the Stars.
Yes. That is a fact. Yeah, she wanted to do something outside of the octagon, and now she's back in the octagon with the fight announced and completely focused on that. So
yeah, but that card, but to her standards, wasn't even big enough to draw her away from TV dance competition. Does it make sense that like Brock Lesnar returning to MMA? Does this seem like a responsible decision? Him jumping back in and saying, "I'm going to be on this paper. I'm going to fight Mark Hunt. I'm going to be on this pay-per-view. I'm not going to, in the middle of my pro wrestling career still, I realize he's not like on, he doesn't work the kind of 300 days a year cycle that pro wrestlers do. A lot of them do. But does this seem like smart money, or is this just one of him? Like, I know he's kind of notably crazy. Does this feel a bit like that?
I mean, should we really question whether or not this is a smart choice, especially when, I mean, realistically, Brock Lesnar is on the biggest card of the year, and he's arguably the biggest draw the UFC has ever seen. So obviously he's going to make a shit ton of money in the 7-figure range. Is it smart for him to go from the WWE to the UFC, especially spending so much time away from the UFC for all these years? I mean, I'm going to say it's smart, yes, because A, he's not that much older than the median age heavyweight in the UFC.
He's still younger than Mark Hunt by several years.
Yeah. I mean, his UFC 200 opponent is in his 40s, mind you. He hits like a truck, but he's much younger. Also, if he is still capable of doing things within the confines of mixed martial arts, there's no reason why he should stay away, especially when he has the opportunity to come into this whole thing and have an immediate impact. I mean, mind you, it's just a one-off thing. That's what the WWE is saying. It's just going to be one fight, and then he's back to the WWE, and that's it. But who's to say that, if he doesn't smash Mark Hunt, that we're not going to see him in the octagon after that. So yeah, I think it's a great decision for him to go if he's absolutely sure that he could do that kind of thing. And nobody's really in a position to tell him, no, you can't do it because you're not prepared. Only he really knows the answer to that. He knows his body. He knows his health. He knows his age. So if he's all up for it, I mean, there will be, I think, millions of people that will be willing to pay to see that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting because I'll admit, I'm now just looking at some numbers because I'm not a big pro wrestling guy. I watched it when I was a teenager. I've come to terms with it as an MMA sister, basically. I'm very fine and supportive of the idea that pro wrestling and MMA are going to be pretty much forever intertwined, no matter how much certain aspects of the hardcore MMA hardcore fandom on either side may do. It's just, there's too much in common for them to just kick it one to the curb and be like, no, that's totally something else.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's the thing that I kind of that got me coming back to it, is that you can't ultimately ignore the WWE's presence if you're an MMA fan, because there's so much crossover appeal. I mean, obviously the WWE is scripted entertainment. Some might argue that the UFC is scripted entertainment as well. But at the same time, like, these are, athletes who are putting on performances for millions of people worldwide. People tune in month to month to see them do their thing, and it's celebrated as a form of combat entertainment, and that is exactly what the UFC is. It's combat, it's entertainment. You have two guys facing off against each other, and in the end, either there's a winner or we're gonna have a draw, and we're gonna do it again, brother. So you could say the same thing with the WWE. So too much crossover to really ignore that whole thing.
So where I was going with that too is that, so I had to go look this up just right now because, like I say, I'm a bit of a layman when it comes to pro wrestling these days. And I'll admit, Brock Lesnar makes a little less money in pro wrestling than I would have thought.
How much does he earn? I haven't looked it up myself.
Apparently, his last reported annual salary was $2 million. That was his 2-year contract that expired in 2015. But he apparently earned in 2015. I'm seeing $6 million. That's a report from Forbes.
Oh wow.
He earned $6 million over the year, and that casts a whole different light to me on his return to UFC 200, because he could easily stand to make like $7 to $10 million. I mean, I can't imagine it being way higher than that. That seems to be about the high end of what the UFC is willing to pay out in points.
Yeah,
for massive pay-per-view stuff.
As far as we know, I mean, like,
yeah.
Obviously, much of this information is only coming from a couple of sources out there in the media, and even them, they their estimations and not exact figures. But yeah, I can't imagine him earning more than roughly around that annual salary for his UFC 200 appearance. But all the more reason to fight at UFC 200. Like, hey, for the last 12 months, you've earned this figure. For this one fight, you could earn just as much, maybe more. Like,
exactly, and that's where I'm shining this light, because I part of me would have thought, and like I say, this is me being way out of the loop here, is that a dude like him might be earning that kind of money for a single WWE event. Like, that you might have a comparable sort of purse size for a massive star like he is, for a single event. And the fact that it's not comparable, like, that makes a lot more sense for why he'd be willing to be like, hey, I want to jump back over here and try fighting Mark Hunt after 5 years of not fighting anyone in a non-scripted context. It's because if it were just like, I'm gonna make 200 grand fighting Mark Hunt and get knocked out, it would just be like
guaranteed he wouldn't take that. Yeah. I mean, there's too much. Obviously, there's too much of a financial incentive for him to pass up on this kind of opportunity. I think everybody knows that. Even it goes without saying. So the fact that he's coming over to UFC 200 and being in what I understand is the co-main event, is going to be huge for him. And let's just say that he wins his fight. Regardless, he's going to go back to the WWE, and he's probably going to be in SummerSlam in August, and he's going to do his thing there. So, like I said before, man, I think I said this off air. He's a full-time staffer with the WWE, and then he's freelancing for the UFC in July and making a shit ton of money doing it. So, bravo to him if he's physically and mentally able to do that kind of thing.
Now, from the UFC side of this, do you think that this has how much do you think this represents, and this is part of what maybe a tone shift for them after a really poor 2014 that we've seen ever since, where they suddenly realize the importance of regularly investing in star talent? Do you feel like this is like, do you feel, because I know that like Brock Lesnar return is something that's been kind of like UFC's kind of teased off and on, Lesnar's teased off and on. Signing Fedor is coming under that too.
Yeah.
But do you feel like part of the reason this is happening now is because the UFC is now saying more often, we've actually got to go do these things and make them happen and spend a little extra money because the return is so worth it?
I think so. I mean, this is definitely an example of this, and I think and most people in the media know that the UFC is not very much at all about co-promotion. They really just want it to be their brand. They want everything to come under the spotlight and have it just say UFC, and there's no kind of mention of anything else. But Brock Lesnar is one of those once-in-a-lifetime, I think, athletes where you have to give into that kind of thing, where you say, okay, I know we're really protective of our brand and we want it to be 100% about us, but let's take this guy from the WWE, kind of give some light to the WWE and thanking them, saying, hey, thank you for the one-off, and bring him in because the return on this kind of shit is just, it's enormous. They've seen the kind of results that he could do in the past. He must have, for years he had the highest grossing pay-per-view. I don't know if that's been topped by Conor McGregor of late, or it's still number one. We'll never know for sure, but it's up there. So, I think it's worth it in their eyes to say, hey, we're gonna spend some money on this and give some light to some other entities just so that we could have this opportunity. Fedor, to a lesser extent, I think, if it was 5, 6, 7 years ago even, they had the opportunity to co-promote, but they weren't certain that the return would be that big. Fedor obviously was highly regarded as the best heavyweight mixed martial artist of all time, still is in my opinion. And they tried to sign him to the UFC, but from what I understand, M1 Global and Fedor's management really just wanted too much, and the UFC didn't find it all that worth it to invest in that kind of thing and to share that kind of light. And the thing that we got to remember too is that historically, Fedor has never really done that well on pay-per-view. I mean, especially during his affliction years. Now, mind you,
the affliction thing, though, like they handed him a bag of shit and they were like, "Here, Joe, how much of this can you sell?" Like, they never really promoted their cards very well. They were hoping that Fedor would be the thing to say, "Hey, everybody's going to buy this," but that just like strengthens my point. They solely relied on Fedor to say, okay, we're going to sell a bunch of pay-per-views, and realistically they didn't. They floated around 100,000, did less than 100,000 once. Well, I think that maybe history too is maybe a little crueler on them than deserved. I think at least I've heard that too, they didn't have much in the way of like pay-per-view platform support. So all things considered, he did actually, even 100,000 pay-per-views with no platform support and no other a really unstable business model. Mm-hmm. It's pretty decent. The thing that I'm actually kind of wondering here is, and I don't want to get too far off on a tangent. The focus is Brock Lesnar, but I do kind of get the feeling that this Fedor may be closer to the UFC than ever. Mm-hmm. Hearing Dana White's comments after that Maldonado fight, which was obviously a pretty terrible fight for Fedor.
Oh, the worst.
And Dana White came out and he was just like, hey, Fedor looked great. There's still a lot of interest in him out there because the Fight Pass numbers did so well. Like they got a huge Fight Pass spike out of it.
Do you know what the figure was, or
I don't know what the figure was, but it was good enough, I think, for Dana White to be like, "Hey, look, this guy did awesome." Like
he did awesome on the internet.
He did, but even if it's on the internet, like I think it's to them, it's something like his value may be fallen enough that they feel like now he can still be, they can offer him something lower and still get enough out of him to make it worthwhile. Like I almost feel like that may be closer than ever.
Yeah, you're probably right in that sense. I mean, I imagine Fight Pass subscriptions peaked a bit with Fedor participating in a card. Albeit it was in Russia and it had a weird orchestra and floating spider lady, but I think it did enough for the Fertittas and White to say, yeah, we could still invest in this guy. Mind you, I don't think it'll be the figures that it was, in 2008, 2009. But
that might be all the more reason for them to do it, is that they don't have to offer this version of Fedor nearly as much money because, I think that even he, after that fight, has to know that, shit's not going as well as it used to.
Yeah, God, man, that was tough to watch. Did you see the fight live?
I did.
Yeah, I was watching it and saying, dude, just stop this. Like, we can't do this anymore. Can we stop doing this? But as I'm doing this, I'm also like,
yeah, my love of freak show MMA will never be like, stop this. I'm like, yes.
God, we're terrible.
But I'm kind of hoping for that out of the Brock Lesnar return, honestly. Like, if Mark Hunt just delivers a terribly brutal beating to this man who's not fought for half a decade, I will feel bad about it. You know?
Yeah, I mean it's. I mean, let's keep it real here. It's a fight. Brock Lesnar wants to fight. Mark Hunt loves to fight. The UFC puts on fights, so let's make it happen. Let everybody see what they want to see, um, and then let them feel bad after the fact.
I will
Us
admit,
included.
too, I'm buoyed by the fact that Mark Hunt looks like he's in the best shape of his career. Did you see those photos he posted recently on his
I did
on
not.
like? No, he looks like cut. It's really ridiculous.
Good luck, Brock.
Yeah,
That guy's gonna hit him so hard. Oh God. I mean, Brock better just put him on his back like right away.
Mark Hunt's takedown defense though is like
It's good.
really solid.
Yeah. It's just
I mean,
if you could get him on his back, that's when the game changes. I think we've seen that.
Brock has an avenue, but it's hard to. I honestly think it's a little hard to see him winning this fight.
Who,
But
Brock? Or
yeah,
okay, yeah,
uh,
it's tough to say.
it is 5 years off against a dude who's got really pretty solid takedown defense. And the thing with Lesnar is too that I think is maybe been. I don't know. I don't even know. I don't know what the perception is on Brock casually, but it's not like Brock was an amazing finisher, like knockout artist,
No,
brutal. He wasn't one of those dudes. It's not Mark Hunt where Mark Hunt lands one punch and then walks off and the fight's over. Lesnar's got this whole physicality to him where the fight could be stopped at any moment because he is so powerful and mauling, but he was never technical or accurate enough to be like, I'm going to hit you once and the fight's over.
yeah, I mean, if he lands it, if he lands the punch clean, the fight can be over. But you're right, he's never been like the technical striker that's been capable of finding the right angle and ending the fight right there. Mark Hunt, however, has been. He's the king of the walk-off KO. That's why I said, like, if Brock doesn't find his way to put Hunt on his back quickly, like, this could be a really, really tough night, really short night for Brock. And but you said it best, man. He's a mauler. Like, he has these mauling moments where if he gets on you, it's just like, oh my God, it's like I wouldn't want to be under that in any moment. Like,
No.
and I just watched the UFC 100 fight of him versus Mir, and the way he was on top of Mir and just landing, like, they weren't even like long punches, just like short punches, but they hit him so hard. And like, and I remember thinking back to that moment as I was watching it live, saying, "Oh my God, like that's those are death blows." Like,
I would much rather
be
fight Mark Hunt than Brock Lesnar, even though I think that Mark Hunt beats Brock Lesnar, because I would much rather just get knocked out immediately and not remember any of it than spend 10 minutes getting pulped into the canvas.
Yeah, it's I mean, you got to think, like, you could circle away from Mark Hunt, right? Stay away from that power shot.
Let's
Whereas
assume I can't. Let's just assume casually that having never fought professionally, I would freeze up and have no fucking clue what I'm doing in there. And B, that let's say I broke a leg or something. You'd
probably have to avoid that punishment.
Yeah, I would much rather get knocked out in one shot than I would just have somebody ride me for 2 rounds and just beat me with elbows half to death.
You'd probably have a longer lifespan with
exactly.
just knocked out quickly. I get it. Mark Hunt over Brock Lesnar, but yeah, would rather fight Mark Hunt.
The flip side of this deal that's going down now is that the WWE apparently rumored wants Ronda Rousey, which makes sense. I mean, these are the things we hear. These are the things that get put out there, that get talked about. It makes logical sense. Ronda Rousey loves the WWE. She wants to pro wrestle later in her career. She has been there before. it seems like something that the UFC could be fine with. Like, Ronda Rousey, they're not getting that much out of her sitting on the sidelines. Do you think that that's something that actually happens, or is that just a media created pipe dream?
Uh, I wouldn't 100% dismiss it. I mean, especially with Brock, with them allowing Brock to come and participate in an actual fight, an actual UFC fight. It's not going to be all beneficial for the UFC just to have Brock, and then the WWE is just like, yeah, thanks. There has to be some sort of return for them, right? Obviously, there's the whole mention of WWE in and out of UFC programming. That's good advertising for them. But what are they getting physically in return? Like, especially when they're sending something physically to the UFC, what are they getting? I wouldn't doubt that Ronda Rousey would be um, a fighter that they would feature inside of the WWE ring, especially with her appearance at the 2015 WrestleMania. That was kind of like, one of the biggest moments of that WrestleMania. The Rock taking Ronda from the crowd, having her hip toss, Triple H, and then, put, Stephanie McMahon in a somewhat armbar. She just kind of like held her, but like they tried to make it like an armbar moment.
But fighting, we can't get too into like she didn't fake it well enough.
Well, I mean, like she sold it. Here's the thing, like, and that's the thing with professional wrestling is like you got to be able to sell it, right? So I think she sold it enough to where people were like, yes, more of this. And like the women's division in the WWE, like as great as it is, like, can you imagine like if they brought somebody like Ronda Rousey to run through that? Like that would just give them a huge pop. And Ronda being the star that she is, like, and especially with like her time of late, like does she want to do the UFC for years to come, or does she want to transition to something else where she could express her abilities and really showcase her talent? Like the WWE, I think it's a great platform for her. So I'd imagine that, like, the name Ronda Rousey might have been brought up in discussions between the UFC and WWE brass. And if we see her, in the WWE ring soon, I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest.
Yeah, I admit, no matter the future, I kind of feel like the UFC, if they get 2 more fights out of Rousey, they'll be kind of lucky. Like I kind of have this feeling that she's as close to out the door as she can be.
Yeah.
And especially considering that the top of the division now has at least one fighter that can beat her. And that she would probably have to fight in one of those her next 2 fights. It's really hard to see, like if she loses that fight again, it's hard to then see her being like, yeah, I want to keep doing MMA. Like she has never sounded like the kind of person who is happy sticking around in something where she loses.
Yeah. She's, openly said that she's never taken losing very well. She's obviously lost before, and she's gone through her thing with that. And now she's experiencing it for the first time on the biggest platform outside of the Olympics that she's ever been on. And it was, in one of the most crushing ways. It's one thing to lose like a close split decision. Like I imagine if like she fought home and she lost by split decision, she'd want that rematch right away, and we'd see her, at most 3 months later in a rematch. But this was something where she was completely outclassed from the opening bell to the final KO. She looked like she was on a completely different level than Holly Holm, a completely different level below, and then she got put out in a way that has inspired memes. It's an image that you can't get out of your head, and people have like really taken this opportunity and to really take advantage and bully her because of that kind of thing. It's been really ugly for her. So who's who's really to blame her for putting herself outside of the spotlight for the first time since like 2012, and just saying, I'm going to do my own thing. I'll come back when she's ready. And Dana White has said himself, like, she'll come back when she's ready. Ronda could take as much time off as she needs because she's really deserved it, man. She was super active in 2015. She kept doing everything that the UFC was asking her to do. So, now she's on an extended vacation and enjoying, life in Venice Beach with her boyfriend, who, is also a UFC heavyweight, Travis Brown, and doing her thing. And then she'll come back when she's prepared. Personally, I wouldn't be surprised if she didn't come back. If she does come back, I don't anticipate that happening anytime sooner than the beginning of next year.
Yeah. So here's a follow-up question too then. WWE loves, I follow enough to get a handle on this at least. They love parody.
Yes.
Right? They love to take storylines from other events and other like sports and things where they can like find some way to connect the sport to the world around it, create those pop connections.
Mm-hmm.
Would they make Ronda Rousey play out her own UFC career in the WWE?
Like how so? How are you thinking?
Bring her in, have her run through the women's division, and then just have her get like train wrecked by some new star that they really want.
That'd be cold. that'd be cold. The writers are just like, if they did that, they're just trying to take a jab at her. I mean, if you're the WWE though, like you want to take advantage of her presence for as long as possible, right? Like she's not. I don't imagine her having the same problems in the WWE that say CM Punk has always talked about, where he feels he never got promoted and they were always putting somebody else over, and ever the spotlight was on somebody else. Like Ronda Rousey would be the women's division in the WWE, just like she was the women's division in the UFC for such a long time, just because of the magnitude of the impact that she has. If they have a run through everybody, I relate it less to her UFC career and more like Goldberg was in the WCW years, where he was just like this undefeated athlete and like running through everybody, and every time there was a Goldberg fight, they're like, oh man, here he comes, and then people would just get stoked for that. Like I imagine like Ronda Rousey doing the exact same thing in WWE.
I can actually see that's a wrestling reference I can actually relate to, because I remember when Goldberg was around and the WCW was around and that whole thing was going on. And that was actually when I was a fan. I was a big fan of the WCW for God knows what reason, but
because you were a kid, man. We were all kids, and we liked what we liked. Like,
I know, but like
hold that against you.
No, I know. It's so weird though, because like I was like actively not a fan of the WWF at the time, and I was a big fan of the WCW, and I'm just like, what the fuck?
You like the underdog. You take Lyft instead of Uber. Like that's it.
It's true, and I did, but I did hate Hulk Hogan. So
wow.
That was before. Who knows what the hell was going on there?
Yeah, that was before everybody had a reason to hate Hulk Hogan.
I know. I just that whole like
to the rule.
Yeah, the whole like him in black thing. It just didn't work for me.
You didn't like the NWO stuff?
I loved the NWO stuff, but not the Hogan stuff.
Oh my God, that was a pivotal moment for me as a kid, man. It was just like, yes, Hogan's gonna come through and check these guys, the freaking Razor Ramon and Diesel. Like he's gonna really show them what's up. And then the next thing you know, he does a heel turn. Oh my God! I know. It was worthy of that that gif of that guy who had this face when the Undertaker lost at WrestleMania to Brock Lesnar. Like I was that. So I can't relate to you on that one, Zane. I'm sorry. I mean, that was the thing.
I was a fan. Like I say, I was a fan of the NWO. I was a fan of what the WCW was doing. But I just always like I could never buy Hogan because he was already ancient at that point, and it was always just like, hear all these dudes like flying around the cage, and then here's this like 60-year-old man like sitting on somebody, and everybody's like, "Oh my God!" He just
in my eyes, because he was so much older than me as a kid, I always thought he was 60. Like he's been 60 for 30 years. Like even when he wrestled Andre the Giant in the 80s, like I was like, this guy's the old guy, right? But evidently he kept the same look for years, and Hogan is Hogan
at 30. So some dudes just do that. I don't know how it works, but it's the way it is.
I have to find the secret because I already feel like I'm approaching 60 and I'm only in my 30s.
Yeah, but you don't look it. You know.
Hey, thank God.
Yeah.
Good thing. Good thing you're inflating my ego and making me feel better about myself. Saying I appreciate that.
No, I mean you know you've got that nice skin tone that tends to keep young and fresh looking.
It's
You
that
know,
Puerto Rican in me.
it's us pale people who tend to really have to worry about aging rapidly in like our 30s to 40s.
I think you'll be all right, man.
Who knows? But so I'm trying to think. Is there an angle of this Brock? So I got to know too because I want to keep this somewhat with Brock Lesnar. What do you think about this whole USADA? Him getting. I guess I don't even want to say he hit the pass because every new fighter they sign gets this exemption from USADA, or relatively. Like if they sign anybody late notice, there's no way that they can have a 4-month pre-fight testing window. So they all have to get that exemption.
Right.
But what do you think about the idea that they left the Brock Lesnar signing till late to give him that exemption?
The USADA stuff is really tricky. And this goes back to the days before USADA where everybody was trying to figure out like what these chemicals were that these fighters were putting in their bodies and what was exempt and what exactly was on the ban list and things like that. It's just in my eyes it hasn't gotten any better in terms of of like cleaning up the sport. I mean, I think a lot of guys are getting popped still. Like it doesn't seem like there's an uptick in pop.
I'm losing you for a second there. Hopefully the audio catches it and we can catch you up. But no, I will say first and foremost, I don't want to like. Oh, are you back? I think I saw. Yes, you're back. Okay. Start talking again about up. You stopped at uptick. Everything fell out after that. You don't think there's been an uptick?
Not a big enough uptick. Not one that I was expecting. I'd say. Guys are still getting popped. I see, but it's when USADA came in, I expected like there to be a lot more violations, and it just doesn't seem that way. And I don't have the exact data to really establish my point here, but I'm just talking from a sense. It just doesn't seem like it's gone any higher up. Now, as far as like the exemption that they're giving for Brock Lesnar, I mean, I really think the UFC is going to take advantage of any loophole they can take advantage of to get Brock Lesnar on a card. To go back to an earlier point, he's a once in a lifetime athlete. So I think they know that, and they're going to try to skate around any type of corner they can in order to sign him. That's not to justify it. I disagree with that 150%, but I could just see that being the process. And from what I know, the exemption is a UFC policy that has been agreed to by USADA.
Yeah.
And so when Lesnar came in, it was totally on the UFC to say, can we get him in? And are they going to hold him to all these rules? USADA just has to bow to the UFC on that front. But I know this is that Brock has been tested a bunch of times since the announcement was made, and so they're ensuring, at least from their perspective, that he's as clean as a whistle, and once he shows up for UFC 200, he's going to be medically cleared to do so.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely, you can't say that like USADA is just looking to give him a pass, because the moment that he stepped through the door of the UFC, they tested him like 5 times in 1 week.
Yeah, absolutely.
They are working overtime to make sure that he gets tested a lot. And it's just, the thing to me is that I'm basically at this point, I'm kind of weirdly anti-drug testing, which I don't want to be, but I don't feel like it's like the biggest change I've seen in the post USADA era with MMA is that everyone, and most importantly fighters, are much more willing to accuse their opponents of doping now than ever before.
Yeah, like that's. I think it all started. With the Chael Sonnen testosterone therapy thing. Like that's when things, I think, or I felt like they really started to take a climb in terms of guys talking about, so and so is doping, yeah, guys juicing and things like that. And and it's still alive and well today, that kind of talk. I mean, we've had Michael Bisping respond to people accusing him of doping ahead of his UFC 199 fight with Luke Rockhold. And like Michael Bisping has always been a guy that says, I fight all these cheaters. Yep. So like you see it all the time still. And USADA comes in and, it's supposed to be this beacon for cleaning up the sport. And it just doesn't felt like that's been the case. Like we still are seeing guys popped on the regular at no greater a rate.
Yeah. And it's just one of those things. Like I'm happy to see Brock Lesnar get in, and I don't really care how they did it. Like I don't care what has to happen for him to come back and take a fight. I want to see this big freak fight because it's fun. And if you pull a few strings to get there, great. Whatever makes him happy. Like if he's just like, yo, I'm not going to sign with you guys 6 months out and be tested for 6 months. I'll sign a month and a half out and you can test me for that month and a half. Awesome. Great. Whatever makes it happen. Like I just,
You want to see some face punching.
I want to see some face punching.
Really, like, I think that's the tone of most MMA fans. Like, I think for the most part, people don't give a shit that these guys are on steroids. It's arguable. Like nobody really has the precise data to really reflect that. But I know I've spoken to a number of people who aren't in the media and just watch fights. They're like, fuck it, let them take all the TRT or steroids that they want, all the anabolic stuff that they want. I just want to see some fights. Like that's how a lot of people think about it.
For 20 years, they basically did. And this whole argument that there's been that like, oh, somebody's going to die because their opponent was was juiced and, that could let somebody kill somebody. If it was going to happen, it would have happened. Like we saw, especially in the dark days of MMA where, you had some of the dudes that they brought in the early days of the UFC within like that first half decade. These dudes, you got them like tank tops with their pecs like poking out the sides. There's practically like a needle hanging out of one arm while they're punching some dude in the face.
Guys looking like Big Papa Pump. You remember Big Papa Pump, right?
Yes, I totally remember Big Papa Pump. That is also a reference that flies straight to my heart. Like we had like that beating up like, weekend karate instructors from the local strip mall. And if it was going to kill somebody, we would have had like that. There were days where it really would have happened.
Yeah. And it doesn't seem like it has. I think whether guys are juicing or not, like MMA is the kind of sport where like guys go into a fight realizing it may be their last, like just because it's the brutality of the sport and the violence of the sport, like what they do inside the cage, while it's entertaining to us and we enjoy watching it, like we realize, you and I, that this is sanctioned violence. Like this is exactly what we're tuning in for. So these guys go into that knowing that, and things could end up really bad for them, but I think they realize it and they take the risk and they want to do it. Like I'm sure you've talked to a number of fighters that have been like, fighting's what I do, man. It's what I know. It's what I love doing, and you have to have that kind of personality. And I think having that kind of personality lets you live with the fact that, hey, this is life and death a lot of the time. So they're able to go with it.
It's definitely one of the things that I think a lot of fans miss when they're like, oh, this guy should retire. Or this guy should
right,
stop fighting or what. It's like if you talk to these people, like they don't. First of all, most of them know exactly what they're doing to themselves. Most of them have a pretty good idea of like how, the long-term implications and the trade-off they're making. Not all of them, not everybody, but a lot of them are like, hey, what, I'd rather fight today than be able to walk when I'm 60. You know,
Yeah,
and a lot of them, they don't have anything else they want to be doing. Like, they don't have another way that they want to be living their life day to day. And it's hard to turn to somebody whose outlook is like, all I want to do is fight, and be like, you shouldn't do that. It's like, well, I don't want to just sit around my house and do nothing. Or if I don't do this, I don't have another way to get a job. So, if my choices are flip burgers and be safe, or get hit in the head a bunch more and risk brain trauma, I will take getting hit in the head a bunch more. And
yeah, I used to be, and I'm totally guilty of this. I used to be one of those writers who used to publish, this guy should retire. Like, I've written that kind of thing before, and I think the first time I did it was with Matt Hughes. And I, looking back on that kind of thing, it's, I wish I wouldn't have written it, but I was young and I didn't realize any better. My editor said, let's run with it. So so I did it. But nowadays I look at these guys and say, instead of saying they should retire, I just tell myself, like, I would be okay with not watching this guy fight anymore.
yeah,
Like, I if you hung up the gloves and said that's my career, I'd be like, good for you, man. Go do your thing. I enjoyed watching you fight up until now. I don't feel the need to see you fight again. And realistically, like, I have that battle with Fedor. Like, with Fedor, when he retired the last time, I was like, good, finally, don't have to see him fight again. And then when the Maldonado fight was starting to circulate, I was like, no, don't want to see it. But damn you, I want to see it. Like, there was such a inner struggle for me. And as I was watching, I was like, damn, man, he obviously is not the same fighter he was during his Pride run. Like, and he doesn't have anything left to prove, to be honest. Like, even without fighting in the UFC, like, he doesn't have anything left to prove. At his peak, he fought the guys who were the UFC heavyweight champions.
Yeah, I saw somebody recently, a pretty well-known, respected writer, who was like, "Oh, if GSP comes back and beats Robbie Lawler beats Mike Bisping for the middleweight title, is he the greatest of all time?" It's like, he already is the greatest of all time. Let's stop rewriting the narrative on these guys as they get older. They had a career where they accomplished everything, and if you're going to constantly try and reimagine that every time they win or lose after they've gotten old, there's no point. Like, guys, basically you have GSP, you got Fedor, and you've got Anderson Silva, and it doesn't really matter what happens to them at this point. Like, they had their careers, and the primes of their careers were pretty beyond compare. And going back and be like, well, if he does this now, it doesn't change anything. It doesn't matter what fights.
What happens. Yeah. Like, we've seen these guys time and time again, like, do great things. And the fact that they can't do them within 2 decades doesn't matter. Like, it's just like 2016 Fedor will get killed by 2006 Fedor. Yeah. Like, and you know that. And if you don't know that, you're lying to yourself. Like, I don't have to see 2016 Fedor fight 2016 Stipe Miocic. Like, it doesn't need to happen for me to say, yep, definitely the greatest heavyweight of all time. No, I've seen him beat Crow Cop at his peak. I've seen him beat Nogueira at his peak. I've seen him beat Tim Sylvia. I've seen him beat Andre Arlovsky just after these guys were UFC heavyweight champions. When everybody was talking and arguing about, oh, Fedor can't beat the UFC's best. He did during his time. And now we have 2016 Fedor, which is literally 10 years past the last time he did really great things. And people are still arguing like, oh, see, he's not the best ever. Like, nobody's the best ever at 10 years after their prime.
Yeah.
Like, look at Kobe Bryant, man. Like, the guy is literally the 3rd highest scoring player in NBA history. But in his last year, he sucked. He knew he sucked. Everybody knew he sucked. Just because he was 37 years old and he had a lot of miles on his legs and played in the NBA for 20 years. Like,
the vision of Kobe on the sideline with all the ice strapped all over his body, looking like RoboCop.
I mean, if if Kobe was RoboCop, I think we'd all have to run for the hills because
yeah, well,
he wouldn't leave the game.
At least the ladies, but hey,
Cold-blooded, Zane, cold-blooded.
So that's actually a great bridge, but I'm going to step it back before we cross it and say, after all that talk, of course, about 2016 Fedor, we are staring in the face 2016 Brock Lesnar, who had a short but brilliant career. The Blade Runner, the light that burns twice as bright, burns half as long sort of thing. And we're still excited. I'm still excited for this comeback.
Here's the thing with the difference between Brock Lesnar and Fedor. One, Brock doesn't have the miles that Fedor has. Fedor has fought for 20 years in mixed martial arts, done incredible things in that time, and now he's finally at a point where it's like starting, or not starting. It already started a while back to show that he's on a steep decline.
Yeah,
Brock, while he lost his last 2 fights in the UFC, only had like 7 fights at the time.
Yep. And
he bowed out because, a lot of people say because he doesn't like getting punched in the face, but let's be realistic. He had diverticulitis. Like that's a serious health condition, and you can't just ignore it. So he stepped back because of that kind of thing. I'm not saying it was 100% the reason why he stepped out of it, but it was a really big concern. So now here we are, 4 years later. We're only 4 years past that point. And he's still in his 30s. He doesn't have a lot of miles on him. And let's be real, he is still a freak athlete. He is enormous. He is strong. He is a great wrestler. Like he still has the capability to do great things in the UFC, I think, even against Mark Hunt. Like if he could find a way to get Mark Hunt on his back, it's all over. Like he will beat the living hell out of Mark Hunt's head if that happens. Like, and you know that, I know that, like, I think everybody else knows that too. So that's the difference between Fedor now and Brock now. Like you have a lot more potential with Brock even at this time.
Yeah, and I think the big part of it too is it's all with fight matchmaking and with these kinds of these narratives, these contexts. It's always to me about the questions that we can still ask. Like Fedor, there aren't that many questions left to ask. The only real question is basically, how would the UFC match him if they gave him a fight? Like that is the only question that I really have about Fedor at this point. Like, what fight could he take in the UFC? It's not, does he win or lose? Is he the greatest or isn't he? How does he do in this kind of fight against this kind of opponent? I've seen all the Fedor that there is to see.
Yeah.
But with Brock, you do still have all these questions about like, how healthy is he? How does he stack? He ran through the UFC's heavyweight division at the time that he entered, the circa 2008. How does he stack up against the 2015 UFC heavyweight division? How does he, does he still have the same wrestling that he did? Because that time off, like it creates a whole bunch of questions. It creates all of these different, now we haven't seen him fight forever. So we don't know what's going to happen, what's going to look like. And that really allows for that excitement. So, yep.
No, I was just going to agree with you that, there are still a lot of questions, justifiably, in terms of Brock's ability to perform inside the octagon. I think, he wants to answer those questions directly with his appearance at UFC 200. He's going to make a shit ton of cash. Everybody knows he's a big draw. He wants to prove to people that he could really be the dominant force inside of the cage that he was when he had his run as UFC heavyweight champion.
So now I'm going to walk back over that bridge with a much less smooth transition, because that really, the Kobe Bryant thing was beautiful, but we're gonna leave the show in a second. But before we go, you're a big NBA fan, right?
I am indeed.
That is the other half of your sports fandom, so to speak. Where do you think? First of all, are you a big LeBron fan?
That is an interesting question. I have had a love kind of like relationship with LeBron over the past 10 years. I hated the fact that he left Cleveland for Miami, and in the way that he did it with that stupid decision show talking about, I'm going to take my talents to Miami, to South Beach or whatever. That was so stupid and self-centered. From what I understand, he left a lot of teams out in the cold in terms of, what decision he was going to make. I think even Miami. And then, once he had his run in Miami, it was kind of like the Galactic Empire. Like LeBron was Vader, and I don't know, I guess Pat Riley was the Emperor, and Dwayne Wade was the guy that got blown up in the Death Star, the admiral that got blown up in the Death Star in A New Hope. And then what's his name? Chris Bosh is just a dinosaur. I'm always just going to identify him as a dinosaur. So that was them. And they had their run, and while they lost the first one, they won 2 in a row. And I felt like at that point, the bad guys can win. And I was like so distraught by the whole thing. I was like, come on, you can't be. And then they came back and got beat in LeBron's last year in Cleveland. I was like, yes. And and then once he went back to Cleveland, I thought that was a good way to kind of close the chapter on him. And it really made him look good. I feel like he said, I owe it to my hometown to come back and win. They weren't like, the team wasn't giving him anything in his first run, and he had to go do his thing. By that point, like at the beginning, I was upset by it because I thought it was a low move. But once he went back, I kind of looked back on that situation and said, yeah, now he's trying to do things right. And while there have been some bumps in the road in order to get to that point, I think what matters is what happened in the end. And he finally had a healthy team with Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving coming in and being supporting roles. J.R. Smith and Iman Shumpert were key players during their run for the championship. And LeBron has his 3rd ring. So I'm not going to hate on the guy for what he's done to this point. He's won 3 championships. Good for him. He's had some moments where I've been like, I hate that guy. I wish he'd just – I wish he would just go away, but in the end, like, I celebrate the fact that good basketball is played. Like, that's the important thing. When I'm watching good quality basketball be played, that's what's entertaining to me. And LeBron James is going to give you that 9 times out of 10.
So you're still not buying a jersey, though?
No, I'm not buying anybody's jersey, to be honest. I'm a 35-year-old man. Like, what am I going to buy another dude's jersey for? Unless it's Patrick Ewing. Actually own a Patrick Ewing jersey, because the New York Knicks were my team for years, and since the turn of the century, I've had headaches season to season with this team, from Stephon Marbury to Steve Francis to like all those bums. Like,
yeah,
it's giving me headaches.
You have hitched your horse to a terrible cart of fandom.
Hey,
you
man,
like a Cleveland Browns fan.
Let's not take it that direction. But I mean, like, when I was a kid, and first getting into basketball, my father came from New York. My brother came from New York. My father grew up in the Bronx. My brother was born out there. So when I came into the picture, they taught me sports. So I ended up becoming a New York Knicks fan naturally. And my brother was always telling me about the Knicks and this guy, Bernard King, and he was such a great scorer. And then there was this guy, Patrick Ewing. He was a 7-footer with a jump shot, which you just didn't see in that era. And so I latched onto that, and I just became like the biggest super fan of Patrick Ewing when I was a kid. And it just, like, even as Patrick went away, and we had other players like Allen Houston, Larry Johnson, and those guys, like, I still stuck by the team, and like, I will always be a Knicks fan, no matter how bad they are. I always will be a Knicks fan. There was one year where I was like, maybe I should just give up on them all. I mean, Brooklyn's getting a team, like, maybe I could get on that bandwagon, but like, after taking like a deep thought about it, I was like, I can't do that to my Knicks. Like, I stuck by them, and I will still stick by them.
The follow-up and final question is Kevin Durant going to the Knicks?
No, Kevin Durant is not going to the Knicks. Their acquisition of Derrick Rose was good for press, but let's keep it real. Like, Derrick Rose is a liability. He is injury prone. While he was the 2011 NBA MVP and was a quality player, Jimmy Butler became the player on the Bulls. Like, he became their most valuable player as people started to realize that Rose is a liability and they can't depend on him. So they got rid of him and they sent him to New York, where point guards go to die. It's a sad truth. I'm hoping, like, in all honesty, I'm hoping the Knicks do well with their acquisition of Rose. Melo, I've never believed to be the one true championship player. He's always been a brilliant scorer, but he's been a defensive liability. He's never done well one-on-one and in transition. So they need more than just Melo. I think they picked up well with Kristaps Porzingis. Like, he is an outstanding player. He's going to be good for years to come if he could stay healthy. I think the acquisition of Rose is more for press and less for winning championships, though.
All right, so on that note, I'm glad to get you wallowing a little before we wrap up the show.
Can you tell him a little bit more? Can you tell him a little bit more passionate about basketball than MMA? Like, you mentioned LeBron, and I go on a tangent. Like, my bad, man. I'm sorry. I know this is an MMA show.
I'm always happy to. I like to. I don't want people to end on too much of an up note. I don't want them to feel like things are going too well. Otherwise, people get outsized expectations. I don't want this to be that kind of thing. But thank you so much for joining me. It was great to do this. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in for the first episode. You can find me on Twitter at TheZaneSimon. You can find you on Twitter at, I don't know how to pronounce that, so you're going to have to do it yourself.
It is pronounced Namless, but it's Nahmles.
All right. You can find him over at Champion Fight or Champion.co or Champions.co?
Champions.co.
Okay, and you can find me over at BloodyElbow.com. Give this video a like. That's a thumbs up. Down below on YouTube, subscribe to MMANation.com. It's DOTCOM. That's our YouTube page. That's where we'll get all our latest videos and all that good stuff. We got If I Did It coming out this week already. I'll be doing a prospectus tomorrow. We'll be having a Knuckle Up coming over the weekend, and then we'll be flooding next week with more content. Obviously, I'm going to be doing vivisections. We'll be having Care Don't Care, all our shows, getting ready for this huge UFC weekend. So thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next time.